Welcome to Influential Women in Washington State. I'm Katie Hall. In this episode, we explore women holding their seat at the decision-making table. Lisa Chin takes us on a journey through the many roles she served throughout her colorful career.
As we look through the current makeup of our country, of higher education, we see, and this is no surprise, that it's primarily male-dominated in leadership positions and especially on boards. So in addition to being on Bellevue College Board, I'm also part of an organization called Women Corporate Directors that throughout the country is a group for women who serve on boards of a certain size. And you can imagine that we talk about this quite a bit. For a board position, because it's all about leadership and governance and setting the tone for the organization at the 70,000-foot level, we could use more female voices, because when you look at how the workforce is made up of primarily women, and it's women in lower level jobs, in lower wages, doing a lot of the service positions as opposed to the leadership positions, we need those voices represented at places where we can make that kind of change. And on the Bellevue College Board, Marisa Hugh Weller is the vice chair, and so there's 2 women and right now 3 men, 4 people of color, which is phenomenal for a board. I think we are over ratio in terms of representing our constituents on that board. So that is something that is very gratifying to me, because we don't get to choose our board members. They're appointed by the governor. So I'm very, very glad that in this position, Marisa and I are the chair and vice chair, and then we've got 2 men of color and 1 white man. And the student trustee right now is also a man of color. So I'm thrilled, beyond thrilled, that we have more diverse voices that are represented in leadership positions. It would be, I think what we can do as a society, so when you look at the fact that the governor appoints these positions, there's not a lot that you or I could do to necessarily exercise our individual will and change the makeup there. But what we can do is through people like you and the work that you do, we can show our little girls and then some of our big girls that there's different ways for them to interact in society, that it is perfectly normal to see someone like yourself leading this effort and showing up and demonstrating how to think about issues in the world, and that there are people like me and Marisa on the board showing that this is perfectly normal. Your mother, your sister, your aunt, your daughter should be in those positions, and here's a few people who may look like you to show that this should be expected.
Wow, that was amazing. And so when you think about that, you mentioned about young girls and big girls, and I totally agree, couldn't agree with you more with that. What do you think that how the dynamics change on the board of directors when you bring women in? And you've even brought up people of color as well. How does that change the dynamics of the decision making on a strategy level?
I think whenever you have people who are not historically represented in positions of power, the experiences and the voice that you bring always changes the dialogue. And even if I wasn't a woman of color, let's say I identified in other ways, let's say I was a man of color, my voice there would lend its leadership perspective from the experiences that I bring. And you and I and many of the people who we interact with understand that who we are as people, who you see me as, you will have a reaction to that. That's just who we are as people, right? We walk around, we make assumptions and decisions about everybody that we see and interact with. So when I'm sitting on that board and I talk about where I've been, or my decisions and my thoughts are informed by my own experiences, it's going to be very different than a former tech executive who's retired and has 40 years of experience as a white male of privilege in society. It has to be different because we're treated differently. So I really value voices that are not traditionally represented in the narratives that we see. So when I sit on that board, I'm very conscious of voices in my head. For example, my nieces, my grandmother more than anybody. All my grandparents were immigrants from China, and I think about the fact that none of them had a formal education, because in China you have to pay for it. So there's no right to education there, and when they immigrated here, all of them were functionally illiterate. Yet my maternal grandmother ended up being very successful, running quite a few restaurants in New York, and in 3 generations, from my grandmother to my mother to me, now all of us, all of her grandchildren, we all have multiple degrees, many of us have been to Ivy Leagues, and many of us have really had a great shot at the American dream because my grandmother did what she could to advance us and to promote education. And so when I sit in those board meetings and when I look out over the mission of Bellevue College and I look out at the students, I think what a privilege it is and what a responsibility I have to them to show them you should expect to have your voice heard. You are valuable. We need to hear what you have to say, and this is one of the ways that you can say that, and you can enrich the dialogue, because the other trustees that I serve with, really good people who care so much about the college and about the world in general, and they are a welcoming group of people, just like this college welcomes everyone who applies to it. And that's what I think about quite a bit. How do I convey that? How do I represent those voices? How do I stand there in a way that is welcoming to other people who may identify with experiences that I've been through? And how do I enrich the dialogue that way so that everyone's conception of what normal is, or what people's rights are based on how their privilege and how they were born, how do we expand that so that more people feel that they can participate? I have been so blessed in this lifetime and so fortunate because other people have held the door open for me. And to me, it's a lift as you climb responsibility, that as I continue to learn and as I continue to have a great deal of opportunity in this world, part of the obligation for that is to make sure that other people have it as well. If you look at the entire world as one big family of people, then why wouldn't I look at this and think, I am so privileged, I want someone else to experience this. I am grateful, I have more than enough food, I have friends, I have a life that I enjoy, and everyone should have that. So that's what I should be doing for other people.
The more women you have in positions of leadership, I think the more women you will get in positions of leadership, because I see a lot of mentoring, a lot of bringing up women today that is very healthy and exciting to see. But it's like sort of getting critical mass, right? When you've got 95% plus of CEOs being white men, it's going to take a while for that sort of pulling people up to really make a big difference.
I like that you mentioned, pulling up people, and I think that it's important that women do pull up each other, but I also think it's just as important, or maybe even more important, that men look to pull up women as well. And, when you are seeking mentors or mentees, you're seeking people that are different from you, to really kind of alleviate some of those challenges.
Yeah, and I think male allies are so critical in
Yeah,
that.
they are.
And the thing that I feel is, as women, when we think about male relationships, or whether it doesn't matter if you're a woman or transgender individual, when you're looking for allies, the thing that I think sometimes we see this with women a lot, which is, you need to have a bar that's high enough. Why are you in a friendship or a relationship with somebody who's not your ally?
That's a good point. That's a really, really good point.
Wow. All right, I'm going to go home and ask my wife. She feels like I'm adequate as an ally.
Because
we don't
need
ask
to raise
ourselves
our
that question.
standards.
Yeah,
Exactly. Karen Kaiser, Senator down on the South Side, one time she said to us when we had a conference a few years ago, is that just because women are in leadership positions now today, that doesn't mean that we're going to always be in those leadership positions. So a race that's won once doesn't mean that it's always won. And so we have to look at always reaching back and keeping that door open. So when you hear that statement, what does that mean to you in your respective careers?
Mentoring. Mentoring, I hear this all the time because, I do this informal group of women on our campus who are going through or getting ready to finish their PhDs. And I'll tell you, that's that's when most people give up, is that last bit. Just when you're writing your thesis, that is, it feels like this gigantic mountain you have to get over. And I keep pushing them, are you done yet? are you still working on it? Are you still working on it? And they get tired of me. But I think sometimes it's just that little question you ask somebody that keeps them going, right? And we all have had that where there's like you're almost ready to give up, and then somebody comes and talks to you, and it kind of keeps you going. I think that's women face that a lot.
Just asking women and telling them, did you ever think about, for us running for office? I remember the moment a woman asked me that question. I mean, I will always remember that moment. It was on an escalator, at the top of an escalator actually in Bellevue Square Mall. Just saying, I will always remember it. And so I try to ask people that because it had never occurred to me until that woman who was the deputy mayor at the time said, you should really think about it. And then I did think about it for a while. But we need to always encourage the next generation, because it doesn't seem like an obvious thing for them to do, some of these jobs that are traditionally male dominated.
Yeah, that's important, and the representation piece of it too. The fact she just like asked you, right? And then you were able to take it from there, which leads me to you, Ben. So I hear this a lot from a lot of doctors, like women doctors, that sometimes when they're in the room, and if it's both a male and a female in a room, that the patient, they will start talking directly to the male, or they'll assume that the female doctor is a nurse. And not that there's anything wrong with being a nurse. Let's be correct there, because nurses a lot of times help run hospitals as well.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, how do you deal with that sometimes in the hospitals when women doctors are looked at second, their voice?
I think it's a really interesting challenge. Each field is a little microcosm of the world that it exists in, and in medicine, you see so many of the flaws of humanity, especially when it comes to gender relationships. As a male who talks too much and can be overbearing, I think I constantly need to keep learning to make room to get out of the way, to redirect, and to be a better presence in those spaces. For our field, it's like yours, I think, we're always in this teaching and learning phase. We're always with students, we're always with residents, we're always with other colleagues, and what we do and how we do it really matters. And I think there's an awareness that all of us have to carry about how we show up, how our physical spaces are, how we think about, we've been working a lot on things like gender affirming environments and practices, and that extends all the way into assuring LGBTQI kind of spaces as well. But this is a whole conversation in a way about hopefully seeing a degenderized future that honors the strengths of many different kinds of talents, doesn't negate them, but also makes space for them in many different ways.
We're living in some really exciting times. There's so much momentum around talking about gender roles, and whenever in history in the past have we talked about LGBTQIA folks, and it's a great time for human rights. It's exciting to be in a leadership role, or even just in society in today, where we're actually talking about this, and we're saying, how do we do this? So I like to think of that as kind of that positive piece that that we can acknowledge.
So I was just going to say, and this might not be safe for television, so let's just go there.
We like
when we had our old city hall in Bellevue, and there was only one woman on the city council. She tells a story about how they would sometimes have a difficult issue in the council meetings, and they would take a break. And everybody would go off and take their bathroom break. And right off of the dais, there was a men's room and a women's room. And she would go into the women's room, where it would be herself and the city clerk. And in the men's room, all the men would troop in. She said, and suddenly I would hear a very loud flush and know the decision had been made. In seriousness, there's a clubbiness to it, right?
Yeah.
And so when we built the new city hall, there's just individual bathrooms that you use. And so that people, when we clump up in groups and talk together, even informally, we're not setting up spaces that cause that to happen in gendered ways. And so it's such a silly thing, but it's very real,
very
right?
real.
It's real because that's where people have their moment to say, what do you really think about that? It's the private space that is very important. And I found that really fascinating.
That's very real, though. It's almost like the good old boys club. A lot of times, you would hear about that piece of. So when you hear that terminology now in 2018, the good old boys club, like what are some thoughts that come to your mind? That's open for anyone.
It still exists.
Yeah, absolutely.
On the golf courses.
Yeah.
Wow.
I was going to say golf courses, and it used to be that you went to a bar, and now it used to be women didn't go to bars, and that's changing a little bit.
Oh yeah.
It's a you can exclude in a lot of ways. You don't need any specific, things any specific area, but you can. But that does help when you have areas that women do not generally go into.
This is why this time also feels a little fragile to me. Like you could do things that would be really unfortunate, like maybe taking your foot off the gas of really pushing for change to be sustaining instead of in the moment. Or you could celebrate things that are good, but still fall short of what you say about like rethinking our complete language and the way we speak and the way we internalize. And it's just so important. Our hospital, Children's Hospital, founded by a woman and a group of women, and it's never had a woman CEO.
What does it really mean to be a leader versus a boss? Listen in.
A leader is somebody who meets people where they are. A leader is not the person who says, I. It's the person who looks at you and says, what do you need? How can I assist what your goals are? And if I can meet you where you are, understand you, because truly believe that that's incumbent on a leader, is to, or anybody who finds themselves in a leadership position, is to really put your ego aside, because it's not about you. It is about everyone who comes after you. And it is about how will you make this world a better place? And the legacy should be that nobody remembers you, that everyone in their actions becomes empowered. Everyone realizes their own potential, their dreams, and that they did that because you were able to, maybe through a word, through a gesture, through sharing something about your life, you were able to spark that within them. But I take no credit for it, Keela, because there's so many brilliant, wonderful people who are in this world. And it is very much a privilege on my part to be able to say, to just hold up that mirror and say, do you understand how bright your fire is? Can you see what you will give to this world? Can you see the joy that just you walking on this earth will enable other people to feel? And if I can do that, that's a legacy I would be very proud of, that never has my name attached to it, because you should be focusing on that brilliant young student who just walked in here, or focusing on that amazing young man who just did something that he never thought he could do. That should be the focus.
Gun violence and terror has made a difference in how we live, and more importantly, how our children perceive the world that they live in. Lisa discusses the youth and how the world we live in shapes their future.
Every generation has its defining cultural moments. And for those 13 and 14-year-olds, my son is 14, the hardest thing he has to struggle with right now is whether or not his sports team wins. And that is a very different experience than you and I had to go through. He will read about some of the events that formed my life in the history books. So Watergate, Kent State, even Columbine.
Absolutely.
He will learn about that as an intellectual exercise, not going through it in his bones. And when I was going to graduate school, there were times in Los Angeles, I'll never forget the day that the riots started, because I was on campus in West LA, and I walked out onto the corner of Westwood. I cannot remember the other street, but I walked outside and I remember people running, because the fires had just started further in South Central LA. So when I think about those incidents, I try to make it real without preaching, or without, what I don't want our young people to feel is any kind of, that this is a lesson, that this is a lesson that's being heavy-handed on them. But to understand that as human beings, sometimes we do this to each other. This is what happens when we don't try very hard to broker understanding, when we don't listen. That in every moment, in every interaction that we have the power to create peace or to go in a different direction. So I try to help them understand, not from a point where they should feel sorry for me or pity me or be horrified or have any of those really strong reactions, but just to understand that what we share as human beings has the power to change those moments that you and I have experienced on a larger scale. I also think that this generation, these 12 and 14-year-olds, are facing something that you and I also didn't have to face, which is terror and violence on our youngest people in our public schools. That is not something that I grew up with. And that threat plus cyberbullying, being completely reached in your own home with hurtful words and actions is something that we never had because there were no cell phones back in the day, right? We had to go out and see people face to face. We had to interact as human beings with all that mess and that nuance and that joy. And, we had to be there with each other. We had to witness those experiences, whether or not we wanted to. These days, with electronics and with television and media, our kids get information to them wherever they are. And so home and school is not as safe as it used to be. So when I talk to them about, this is my experience as a woman of color and how I have been looked at when I walked through those halls of power, it's going to be different for them. And they may think, oh, that's a cool story. I saw that last night on the news. But it's only a story to them because their reality is very different. So I try to understand how their world and how violence and pain and all those things that have the potential to make you stronger, how they're experiencing that and how that's so different. Otherwise, it's just become another one of those voices that's just going like this at them that, yeah, you always talk about that, and you walked to school uphill in the snow both ways, and yeah, I know it was hard, Mom. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge.
It is. It really, especially that snow story. I heard that same story from my parents. I think, although I didn't have that story, I think I'm gonna tell my daughters the same thing. It's just a cool story.
Yep.
And so, you're right. You talked about gun violence and cyberbullying. So, what are some of the things that the Boys and Girls Club is doing with the youth to be able to tackle some of those very difficult but serious conversations? A lot of times, those type of things are leading to kids committing suicide.
Yes.
So how are you all handling that at the Boys and Girls Club?
So in our clubs, there's a total ban on use of electronics.
Oh, really? Talk
Yes,
to me about that. How does that work? Can I send my 3-year-old?
You can send anybody you would like. Cell phones have to go away, no personal computers.
Wow.
We have state-of-the-art computer labs. We also have recording equipment. And we try to emphasize to everybody that it's in our mission to create a safe space for everyone. I mean, our web address is positiveplace.org because we focus on good character and citizenship, on healthy lifestyles, on academic readiness, but really it's about helping every kid reach their full potential. And so when they walk in the doors, they know that their backpacks go away, their cell phones go away, and we really have a zero tolerance rule for that because we want people to interact with each other. So we have a number of programs as well that help our middle school kids. We have a program called Wise Guys and Smart Girls that really separates people into groups by gender, and we talk about some of the pressures, or we enable them to talk about some of the pressures that they're experiencing in school. And then we have teen leadership programs, and we face these issues head on because it's right in our mission to help our young people become good citizens. So while we never take a stand in politics, we will be absolutely fierce in educating our young people about their civic opportunities. So we will not come out and say we believe in this movement or we believe in that movement, but we will encourage. So let's say, Keela, you were a 12-year-old in one of our clubs. One of our conversations might be, yeah, I know, Keela, what happened in Florida is really scary. So let's talk about what can you do? What did those students do? What are you feeling right now, Keela, and how can we address that? Did you know that you have a democratic system of government and that we can go talk to your state representative and we can talk to your federal representative? So that's what we do well, is help our young people understand the systems and their rights within these systems that we have, and we completely encourage them to exercise their voices. It is a joy to see the strength that these young people have and to see them, to hear their voices and their desire for goodness and strength in this world. It truly is very humbling to see them.
Why are those young voices so important?
Because when you look at Mae Jemison, she probably didn't know when she was little that she was going to be an astronaut. And it's really important for our young people to understand that there should be no boundaries to their dreams. And when you walk into a world and everybody you see in a position of authority and power over you does not look like you, talk like you, that you don't see them in your neighborhood, you don't run into them in the grocery stores, you start to think that, well, what they can do is what they can do, and I'm not like them, so I can't do it. Children, they shrink their dreams when nobody encourages them to dream big, or when the world slaps them back. When you turn on the television and all the cool people, all the ones who are winning the prizes, and all the ones on the TV shows who are the heroes and heroines don't look like you, and all the people who are getting shot, killed, incarcerated, who you're getting the message, bad people, not okay people, they look like you, or they look like people you love, that tells you, that gives you signals that as a human being, you think, oh, I guess that's what's expected of me. And then that's what you dream about. So that's why it's so important that you and I and everybody else who hasn't been traditionally represented in our media, in our positions of power, that our kids see that. Because then they think, Aunt Tequila, I can do what Aunt Tequila does, and I'm going to do it too.
I hear a lot, and I've been hearing this, especially for maybe the last 20 years. I want a seat at the table from women. I want a seat at the table. Over the last 2 years, I have turned that on its back, and I say, keep your seat. I'm bringing my own table. What does that mean to you?
Bravo. Bravo. I think I love that. I think we need to do both. I think people need to be encouraged to bring their tables. They need to feel strong enough and trust themselves enough and have enough confidence and feedback that that is okay and that is welcome. Especially this generation that we're building, the circumstances that we have gone through, that my generation has gone through, is all about setting out the opportunities and setting out the tools for younger women and younger people to be able to take that and build their tables and have confidence that that's going to be accepted. At the same time, there is so much concentration of power, so many doors and ceilings that are based on gender and based on race and based on so many different things, that I feel at this stage in my career, I'm still going to be knocking down those doors and clearing the seats, because we need both, Keela. Yeah. We need to hear, what should the tables be? Because this generation has the opportunity to do that, to say, I don't even want a table. I'm taking a chair, or we're not even doing that. We're going to stand because this is what I see, and this is how we're going to do this world. At the same time, there's still tables. And I still want, in those very traditional corridors of power, to have the new voices there, because this is the only way we're going to change things to be a kinder, more positive society for everybody, that we really do value those voices, both in the corridors that have been created and in the corridors that these new voices shall create. We need both.
Thanks for joining us in our exploration of leadership. We hope you're encouraged and inspired by Lisa and women just like her, leading our nonprofits, colleges, and board of directors across the nation. Please join us for future episodes of Influential Women of Washington State to hear more in-depth discussions with extraordinary women. Until next time, I'm Katie Haw.